Mastering your ego is one of the keys to maximizing your progress in the gym and in life. In this video, I'll break down what your ego is, how it often holds you back, and how exactly you can identify it. I'll share insights from my own journey to help you become more aware of your ego. And most importantly, I will teach you how to harness it to boost your progress rather than have it sabotage your growth like it does for most people. I really attribute mastering my ego as one of the most important turning points of my life. Not to say the journey's over, it's still an ongoing evolution, but my increased awareness of it is something I view as responsible for a lot of my success in not only my sports, but my content creation journey and entrepreneurship. While this did not happen overnight, slowly improving at identifying its role in my psychology over the years has allowed me to make better decisions which were more in line with how I might actually achieve my goals, rather than chasing the wrong goals or chasing the right goals for the wrong reasons. So let's get into it. The first thing people think of with regards to ego are people with big egos whose sense of accomplishment is out of touch with reality. Or the ego lifter who is out to prove himself by lifting as heavy as possible with poor form, gets injured, doesn't progress, nor seems to learn from their mistakes. Inherently, we are very attuned to other people's egos and are quick to pass judgment on them, but we don't identify these exact forces in ourselves. We all have an ego, and we view ourselves as the main character in our story, and we often view ourselves in the best light possible. Our egos paint a picture where we believe we're better than we are, find excuses for why we fall short, or discredit others for advantages that we don't have because they're getting better results. All of this functions to preserve our personal reputation with ourselves because from an evolutionary perspective, we need to feel important and useful to our tribe so that we are not excluded. And our ego is completely necessary to help prevent excessive psychological discomfort by deflecting criticism. And it also functions to motivate us by making us feel good about accomplishment. But if you don't raise your awareness of your ego, its processes can start distorting your reality. And if you're distorting your reality just so you can make your ego feel better, you lose track of what is actually necessary to make progress, which I believe is one of the biggest reasons why people plateau. In terms of defining our ego, there's tons of differing perspectives. From a Freudian or psychological perspective, your ego is your mind's mediator who balances your primal desires with moral rules. From a spiritual or Eastern perspective, your ego is your constructed sense of self, an illusion of separateness, attaching your worth to labels, achievements, and possessions. From an evolutionary psychological perspective, the ego is an evolved psychological mechanism designed to help humans navigate complex social groups by managing reputation, status, and social alliances, enhancing survivals by monitoring how we're perceived by others. I personally like a combination of these definitions. To me, my ego is the story I tell about myself, which is usually presented in the best light. I am a self-coached, 6-time national bench press champion, pro natural bodybuilder, a strength and transformation coach, influencer, solopreneur. I describe myself with all of the best accolades that paint me in the best light. But at the same time, I'm also a confused overachiever who ends up prioritizing ambition over relationships. I overthink, I'm avoidant, I'm guilty of taking on way more than I can handle. I've been blessed and lucky with life circumstances, being born tall and good looking, in a first world country surrounded by love and freedom. All of this has allowed me to pursue my passions and desires to my heart's content, which I recognize is not a luxury afforded to the vast majority of humanity. And if I didn't have these circumstances blessed upon me, I might not have been able to capitalize on them in this way. But if you ask me, why wouldn't I describe myself with the latter? Because inherently, our ego wants to be respected. We don't want to be looked down upon, discredited for our achievements, and not be considered useful to our tribe because social exclusion is a threat to our survival. But by being higher up in the social hierarchy with more status and reputation, it solidifies our place in society, ensuring our survival, but also ensuring we get more out of life, with more resources, mating prospects, and perceived happiness and fulfillment. How would we motivate ourselves if we didn't have an inner force driving us towards these things? Life can feel helpless at many points during our life, even with our ego present. So we need our ego to create a strong self-belief, which is often illusory at times, but still functions to create and facilitate audacious goals to drive us up the social ladder. But this internal drive and pressure can come at a cost. An overactive ego can block out criticism, avoid challenges to not expose ourselves to failure, and result in a fixed mindset. It can come up with excuses to not take the actions you need to facilitate progress, such as not doing anything we aren't already good at. It can lead to excessive comparison to others, which can cause envy and lead you to dislike them rather than learn from them. All of these things preserve our self-image, but come at the cost of stagnation. For myself, there were points I thought I was more knowledgeable than I was, which prevented me from learning new information which was absolutely necessary for growth. There were times I convinced myself I was progressing when I wasn't, or I found some convenient excuse for my plateau, like my long limbs. It's so much easier if you're shorter. There were many times I looked for reasons why this guy who beat me in competition couldn't have been natural or had better genetics than me. But what did these inner narratives actually accomplish? Preserving an imaginary construct of myself so I could feel better? Were these thoughts leading to the actions which were actually going to progress me? No, they weren't. They justified standing still and creating a false reality where I could feel good about myself. I only learned this after long periods of plateaus. I was not facilitating the mindset I needed to progress, and this stemmed from my ego. If I want to be the best I can be, I need to do what is necessary to ensure objective progress. And that means identifying my ego in these processes, learning how to shed it when necessary, but also learning how to step into it and utilize it to my advantage. But the first step here was accurately identifying it, which can be the hardest part. And on my journey, my biggest breakthrough in properly identifying my ego was having it break. I remember going through a breakup in my early 20s and wondering why it was so hard to get past it. The eventual realization that occurred was because my ego was hurt. Someone no longer valued me in the same way I valued myself, and this created a cognitive dissonance where my entire life's perception of myself was challenged. And I had two choices: to face the reality that I wasn't good enough for someone and I was wrong about myself, or lie to myself and find reasons that it was all her fault and not mine. After reflecting on it, it wasn't even that I necessarily missed her. It was the collapse of my reality that hurt so much, and not being wanted in the way my ego thought I deserved to be wanted. When I discovered that my ego was responsible for all of this pain, I grew angry. I didn't like having my freedom and well-being dependent on some internal process I wasn't aware of or couldn't control. I wanted to determine that for myself. So from then on, I went on a journey of trying to eliminate my ego completely. I was mad. I wanted it gone. So I went through a phase of only taking actions which were not influenced by my ego whatsoever. I grew aware of the things I was doing for validation, like posting on social media for likes, pursuing women for the wrong reasons, and excessively ego lifting. I stopped talking about myself in conversations and started focusing on the person I was talking to instead. I stopped judging other people and feeling like I was superior to them. I paid attention to whether my actions were fueled by impulsive ego drives and whether I needed to be so competitive all the time. I started second guessing what my motivations were. Like, why was I chasing gains in the gym? Was it to feel attractive to women, garner respect from my peers, or fill a void I didn't know I had? I stopped blocking out all criticisms and started reflecting more on them and why others may perceive these things. I stopped being so envious of people who were doing better than me and stopped coming up with reasons why they had an advantage that I didn't have. And I stopped chasing validation through relationships or hookups. Overall, this was a very productive period in my life, and it provided a lot more clarity on what was important to me. And it got me a lot closer with those around me by focusing more outwards and not having my energy exude judgment. While a lot of these insights occurred outside of the gym, this deep analysis of my ego extended into the gym as well. I learned of all the ways my ego influences my training, such as learning that I would avoid doing exercises that might be considered weird and unconventional because my ego didn't want to get judged. But this was preventing me from doing exercises which were completely necessary for me. Or learning that the reason that I was afraid of failing lifts was because my ego was afraid of what a failed lift would say about me, even though failing lifts is absolutely necessary and shouldn't be avoided. Even constantly needing to be seen doing heavy weights all the time. I should feel fine repping it out with lighter weight as well. One of the most important things that I needed to remind myself was to remain a humble student, even though I spent hundreds of hours learning, teaching, and putting it into practice. There's still so many areas I can improve, and the information I utilize needs to also evolve alongside me as I get more experience. And I can still improve my execution and my problem solving to this day. You can't max out in the gym. There were so many ways my training was getting limited just because I was trying to maintain an imaginary self-reputation. And by becoming more aware of its involvement in my decisions in the gym, I slowly started making better decisions which were more in line with what I needed to do in order to progress, rather than simply trying to feel good in the gym. But eliminating my ego also had a downside. I eventually fell victim to the next phase of my personal evolution, having the ego of having no ego. Your ego never disappears, it just ends up hiding more effectively. And by trying to force my ego into submission, it removed a lot of the things I normally take joy from. Movement towards my goals, which normally provide me a lot of satisfaction, started to feel less appealing, because I knew I was doing it for my ego. But stopping myself from doing these things had me feeling a lot emptier. I was having less fun and I was justifying stagnation. Seeing everything as a rat race and somehow being above it all was not changing my life in any meaningful way. I was not progressing in the way I should be when I normally have my ego fueling me, especially in order to succeed to conventional societal standards. I live in a Western world, so I can't opt out of it and meditate in a cave. I eventually realized I was just kind of having a worse time. And it's not even like I managed to eliminate it either. I was just getting high on having no ego. It was here I realized that I don't need to get rid of it completely, and I can learn to work with it. Ego can be a very powerful force to drive us, and we should want to utilize it, not eliminate it entirely. And luckily, with my newly attained increased awareness of it, I was able to pretty easily identify whenever it was present and gauge whether it was ultimately useful for the task or not. When I started embracing it, that's when everything changed. Ego is a powerful force, and for me, it's this inner conqueror who wants to take it all. I can fuel this conqueror with accomplishment by doing the things that are hard and haven't been done before. And I can go full circle. I can do things for validation like ego lift when necessary, and receive these things that pump my ego up. I can set big egoic goals, but now chase them in a healthy manner where I don't need to beat myself down if I don't get them or chase them simply for validation alone. But I just need to be aware of these things and not let it go out of control. I can tie my fulfillment to progression in the areas I set my big goals, so I can be fulfilled and my actions can be fueled by my ego at the same time. This keeps me more attuned to what is actively progressing me as well. And with my increased awareness of it, I didn't need to let things which would normally slow me down affect me anymore. Failure started affecting me less because in real life, you just learn from your failure and apply the lessons forward. It's never the end of the road. Yet our schooling system creates an unhealthy relationship with failure, and we act like we have a life transcript which we carry around with us. I stopped getting offended when my ego would get challenged by a snide comment or someone trying to discredit me by saying I'm not natural or that I have better genetics. Even getting rejected by women started to hurt less, because it's fair from what they've experienced of me that they weren't attracted or their circumstances didn't permit. I'm not going to be attractive to absolutely everyone, nor do I need to take every rejection personally. And by freeing up all this mental bandwidth and not worry about some imaginary reputation I needed to uphold at all times, I experienced an improvement in my mental health overall, which ended up helping my reputation because I was just more enjoyable to be around. And by not stressing over egoic issues, it allowed me to pursue my goals in a more sustainable fashion where I actually got to enjoy the process of chasing the goal, rather than have my grind come from a place of inadequacy, needing some outcome to finally fix everything. This awareness literally changed my life, and it took what might have been a very painful period of my life and turned it into something very insightful and fulfilling. So I hope this video could help inspire something similar in your life. Going through a phase where you try and eliminate your ego and practice some ego detachment could be very useful. You won't be able to eliminate completely, but learning of its involvement in your actions and decisions can be very insightful. This might involve some form of meditation where you learn how to observe your thoughts. You can continuously question your motives. Are you doing this thing for praise, validation, or genuine passion? Can you learn how to accept constructive criticism, even if it's not meant to be constructive, and seek to understand why this person may have projected something upon you? You can also practice humility, gratitude, empathy, and compassion, and serve others without expectation. And by increasing your awareness of your ego, you can start identifying the situations where it can help you or holds you back. And if you can learn to master your ego, you can attain an incredible sense of freedom that comes along with it.